The Maselli Group presents seminars and workshops, advanced presentation skills for financial professionals, with Frank Maselli, financial industry expert and author of the best-selling book, Seminars, The Emotional Dynamic. Episode 11, Happiness.
Hi, I'm Frank Maselli. Welcome back. This is episode 11, Happiness, one of my favorite subjects to talk about in the workshop or seminar context. Why is happiness even on the list of emotions? Why are we talking about happiness? Well, the simple answer is that you are competing with a gigantic number of events that occupy the client's world. There are a million things I'd rather do than go sit in a boring economics lecture or some thinly disguised sales pitch, which a lot of workshops are, unfortunately. So when you think about the client's world for a minute, you've got to make this event an enjoyable process. You've got to give them something to look forward to, and you've got to let them leave the event saying, wow, we had a good time. This was well worth coming to. So how do you create and deliver an experience, a total experience, that gets that feeling, that creates that happy feeling in the mind of the audience? Let's cover this in some detail because I think it's important. Make them happy. The number one thing to think about when you're creating a workshop or an event is that you actually have to have some real value. This sort of goes without saying, but I think it's important to understand. The people who came to your event came with some expectations. They really wanted to learn something. They came because they're struggling, they're having a problem, they know they need some kind of help. And so the first rule is give them some real value. Give them something that when they go back, they can actually implement in their world. It will help them. Give them some real help, in other words. Don't just build the seminar on fluff. It's not just a product pitch. It's not a story time. It is something that's going to really make an impact in their lives. And I think that's the number one thing. If you skip everything else, but I leave your seminar with some strategies, with some ideas, I'm happy. It's been a good investment of my time. That's the whole point. Knowledge is fun. People do like to know stuff. So I'm not saying you have to create comedy club here, and we're going to talk about humor in a second. Giving people information in a fun, entertaining way can be great. And knowing stuff, learning stuff is a lot of fun for folks. Get them engaged. Audience engagement is a fairly complex issue, and I don't think you're going to have a chance in the typical workshop or seminar to do a tremendous amount of audience engagement, but some of it's important. I like to use quizzes, games, and contests, and I use them sparingly. I won't use more than one or two. I have a fun game that I like to play in my seminars and workshops. It's called The Price Was Right. The Price Was Right, okay? What we do is we pick a year. The year is 1978. And I'll have a group of PowerPoint slides. And I usually use this as a transition coming back from the meal. Remember we talked earlier about the agenda. You're going to tease them, you're going to feed them, and then you're going to come back with the body, but you're going to do a transition. This is a great transition element. So I will come back with The Price Was Right, 1978, and we put a couple of interesting things that happened in 1978. Sally Ride, first woman in space, Lotus 123. You know, it was a lot of fun stuff. And then we put up there a picture of a loaf of bread, or a picture of a new car, or a picture of a new house. And we say, what did this cost in 1978? What was a gallon of gasoline in 1978? And I'll go through a list of about 10 or 12 of these little items, and everybody will get talking. Oh, a gallon of gas was 35 cents. I remember going to the gas station. Gallon of milk, 60 cents. And then we flash on the board what it really was, what it is today, and what the inflation rate is. It's fun. It's got an economic message to it underlying, but it's more fun than anything else. The whole thing takes 5 minutes. The Price Was Right. You can look it up on my website, or you can call me and we can talk through it. It's very simple to set up, easy to do, but it's a great way to get the audience engaged and still keep them focused on the topic. I like to give people a peek behind the curtain. What do I mean by that? Well, in simple terms, there are retail ways of investing, and then there are institutional ways of investing. Now, I've been on both sides of Wall Street. I started as a retail stockbroker, working with the most retail clients you can imagine at a Sears store. And then later on in my career, I became the national sales manager of a fairly large money management firm in Boston, a name you would know if I mentioned it very quickly. But this was the institutional side of the money management world. So I have kind of seen both sides of the world of money and investing. And what I love to do in my seminars is to say, folks, this is how the public does something, and this is how professionals do something. Let me give you a glimpse into the world of professionals. I think you, as financial professionals, understand this, and you here in the room understand this as well, okay? We have an advantage as professionals. Not that we get better information, not that we get it faster. Information is a total commodity. We have a certain set of disciplines that we use that have been tested, and we have sometimes disciplines that have been instilled upon us by investment committees, by board of directors, and those disciplines protect us against emotions. The public is emotionally insane. The public has run rampant. The world of investing, from a retail perspective, is ruled by emotion. The institutional side looks at the public and laughs. The institutional side looks at the public and says, what are they doing? And we're going to do the opposite. And the results are staggering. And I think we as professionals know the statistics on this. The public does not know this. The public doesn't know that the average retail investor over the last 20 years has done 3% a year, while the average institutional investor has done 12%. Public doesn't understand that. So what I like to do at my workshops is just give them a brief glimpse behind the curtain, backstage on the world of professional money management. How do you tie it in? Folks, these are disciplines you can use, and I am your access point. That's been my message, and it's been a pretty powerful message, and all of you are capable of doing that because you understand what I'm talking about this professional versus retail. Very powerful thing to do. Okay, now this is the big one. Let's talk about humor. Humor, we could spend the rest of the video on humor. We could do hours on this subject, and it's just, and frankly, it would be opinion because there are so many different ways to be funny and to have fun in front of an audience. There are some things that you have to guard against, though. So let me talk briefly about humor. It's a very personal issue, but I think it's the Swiss Army knife of public speaking. In fact, if you want to put it in a more modern context, I think it's the Leatherman multi-tool of public speaking. Humor is something that will get you out of trouble. Humor is something you can use throughout the entire body of the presentation. It loosens things up. It relaxes people. It enhances memory. It keeps things moving in the presentation. It keeps the flow and the pace going, which is very important. It gets you out of trouble. What kind of trouble? Okay, a million possible things. You could have a sniper. You could have a griper. We'll talk about the speaker nightmares in a little while. Somebody could have dropped the whole tray of dishes. A little bit of humor protects you from getting too far sidetracked when something goes wrong. And by the way, something will go wrong. You do more than 2 presentations, I promise you something's going to go wrong. So you have to be prepared for that. Don't be scared by it. It's totally normal, by the way. Just embrace it, and humor can help you. It bonds you to the audience if you do it well. We'll talk a little bit about self-deprecation. Self-deprecation is the core, the basis of all speaker humor. Unfortunately, there's a line you cross, and I'll explain that. You go too far in the world of self-deprecation, and you're up the creek, so don't do that. It makes you seem more intelligent. Now, this is interesting, and I don't want to hit this one too hard, but I think humor is a sign of intelligence. I personally think that, okay, and there's a handful of exceptions to this, but I think stand-up comedy might be the highest form of human communication. It's probably one of the most difficult things on the planet to do, and to do well. But when you can get people laughing in an intelligent way, not a derogatory, not a vulgarity kind of a presentation, but when you can get people laughing, I think it's a real significant sign that you're tapped in, you understand, and you're a smart person. I think it just goes hand in hand. So, here's the bad side. Humor is dangerous. And it is a tool that can be badly misused in the hands of an amateur. And frankly, even in the hands of a professional. Humor is extremely subjective. What you think is funny may not be funny to the audience. So be careful. This is not comedy club. You don't get any points for offending people. You lose clients when you screw up. Not jokes. We talked about that earlier. Humor is not canned. It's not, it was 2 people walked into a bar. Bam, amateur speaker. Doesn't work. Don't do it. okay? Professionals don't tell jokes. Professionals use situational humor. Planned versus spontaneous. This is interesting. Spontaneous is great, but good luck. Spontaneous takes a lot of practice. It takes tremendous amount of experience. When you get to the point where you can be spontaneous with your humor, I think that's fantastic. And many of you may have reached that point. It's a wonderful thing. Something happens, you respond, somebody says something in the audience, boom, you're on top of it, and it's kind of a funny interaction. That takes years. Don't expect that from yourself at your very first event. Okay? So plan some of your humor. Think about moments in the workshop when you are going to be funny and build them into the workshop. Think about the presentation. Look at the presentation and look at moments when you can say, hey, this not reminds me of a story, but let me tell you, remember one of our we talked about stories earlier, a funny story. Don't ever say this reminds me of a story. Just tell the story, by the way. Don't telegraph your story. Situational humor means things that are happening in the room, means things that are happening in the economy. Keep it situational, keep it focused. Don't stray too far afield. I don't tell funny stories that have nothing to do with the presentation. That's just a distractor. It's a time waster in the mind of the audience. Uplifting and never insulting. I don't like to insult people. There's just no upside to that. There's no reason for doing anything like that. Keep your humor uplifting and fun. Don't degrade. Now, extremely advanced technique, okay? For 1% of you out there are times when picking on the audience can be very effective and tremendously fun. I have this little thing that I do in some of my workshops. Don't try this at home, okay? These are professionals, so be careful. I look for the young people in the room. I told you in an earlier episode, I'm very jealous of young people, and I pick out people in the room, and we have tremendous fun with the young people. And now, you know, you've got to be careful with that. You don't want to push too hard, and I say, hey, look, if I pick on you, if I make fun of you, you get a free book, and people sort of like that. So it takes it down a notch. But there are times when you become really good at this that picking on selected people in the room can be absolutely hysterical. And this is interesting, the people you pick on, they're the first ones to become your clients because you've brought them into your world and you've done it in a fun, exciting way. They love it. They absolutely love it. You know, people paid money to sit up front at Rodney Dangerfield's presentations. Rodney Dangerfield, arguably one of the funniest comedians, stand-up comedians of all time. People paid extra money to be picked on by Rodney Dangerfield. It was an honor to be picked on. Similar thing, okay? Similar thing, although we don't want to go that far, obviously. Self-deprecation, cornerstone of all humor. Who are you making fun of with self-deprecation? Yourself. What are you going to make fun of about yourself? Again, be careful. You've heard me in these episodes make fun of myself a little bit. Okay, I'm New York, I'm obnoxious, which, by the way, is not true. But New Yorker, I've made fun of my weight. I've used that a few times. Sicilian, what else? Emotional, obnoxious, aggressive, various things about myself. What would I never make fun of about myself? What is the line crossing moment where you just don't want to go? I would never make fun of my professional skill. I couldn't pick a stock if you put a gun to my head. No, not funny. Okay, you're a financial professional. I would never make fun of my firm. Gosh, Payne Weber, what a pain in the butt to work for this company. You have no idea. What are you doing? You're undermining your strength, your credibility. Don't do that. I don't make fun of my wife. Interesting. I use my wife in self-deprecating stories to make fun of myself, but not to make fun of my wife, and there's a reason. There's two reasons for this. One, the men in the audience, even though they will want to laugh, will not laugh because the women will hit them, and the women will disconnect with you. And as we all know, through experience, it's the women who control the money. Okay, so if you start angering all the women in the audience, you're done. You can stick a fork in yourself because you're done. So be careful with your humor. Self-deprecation is good. I'll show you another example very quickly of crossing the line. I saw a woman doing a seminar. She was fantastic. And she had the audience right where she wanted them. But then she just threw this line in that she did not need. Very casual. She said, oh, I'm so scatterbrained and disorganized. You could hear a switch go click in the mind of that audience. And I sat there and I said, oh, God, why did she do that? She didn't have to do that. This audience was loving her. She threw in an extra layer of self-deprecation that went over the top. And the audience basically said, we don't want to work with somebody who's scatterbrained and disorganized. too far. Be careful with self-deprecation. A little bit good, it's like spice. A little bit good, too much kills the flavor of the meal, okay? But Frank, I'm not funny. I'm not funny. And that's good. It's good that you know that, and it's good that you have the confidence to say that. Because there's nothing more uncomfortable, in my opinion, than somebody who's trying to be funny. But the first question I would say is, can you look a little harder? We talked about self-deprecation. My philosophy is, if you can't find anything funny to say about yourself, you're not searching hard enough. So dig a little deeper and find something funny. In fact, saying you're not funny and playing on the fact that you're not funny in itself can be fun. That's interesting. But don't push too hard. There's nothing more uncomfortable than somebody who's not funny, who's trying to be funny. You can't push a button and be funny. It doesn't work. So don't do it, and it's better that you just get through the presentation and learn humor over time. Nothing more uncomfortable, but unfunny can be funny too. And you might start the presentation by saying, folks, listen, I am boring. I want you to know right up front, hey, that loosens things up. I mean, you know, they wrote this insurance presentation with me in mind because, you know, I'm a boring guy. Okay, guess what? That's fun, that's a little self-deprecation, and it's great. And when you really are boring, when you get into a really detailed part, you can stop and say, hey, listen, I told you I was boring, right? This is it. We are now deep into boring here. Simple stuff like that, it can work wonders. You don't have to go too far. If you're really in trouble, just smile. Just enjoy the process and let them enjoy you. I mean, at some point you may have to throw your hands up and say, listen, I can't do this. I'd rather just get through the presentation. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay. Humor is an advanced concept, but we all have a sense of humor. Tap into your internal sense of humor, okay? Find the funny inside. There is funny inside all of us, all right? Don't push too hard. Don't go over that self-deprecation line, and never, 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 if you can avoid it, unless you're really good, insult that audience, because you're just going to lose people in the long run. Humor, very critical for your success.